You're tuned in to Around the Lens, the internet's only live streaming roundtable discussion podcast, featuring Zach Roberts, Ron Hamilton, Travis Keys, and your host, David J. Murphy. Hello and welcome to Around the Lens episode 159. I am your host, David J. Murphy. Joining me as always is my co-host, Travis Keys. Hello,
hey,
Travis.
What's going on? How's everything going?
Going good, buddy. How are you?
Has it been a week already?
Oh my gosh, the time flies when you're waiting for this
feels
show.
Like a month. Yeah.
Indeed. I wish we could do the show more often. What you been up to, man? Anything new?
Yeah, it's been a marathon for me. I actually did 4 shoots in 24 hours and almost killed myself. just in non-sleep, going from a corporate shoot to a magazine shoot to a social media press event shoot back to another corporate shoot, all within 24 hours.
Oh my gosh.
So that was probably the most I've done in 24 hours.
Wow. Was that on
separate jobs? Not on the same job, but on separate jobs.
Yeah. Was that design, like by design, or did it just happen to everybody? It all converged like that on accident.
I have days where sometimes I get contacted by people, and it's like all for the same day out of the blue. I mean, usually it's a full week, but for some days, some calendar days become very hot, and if I can fill them, I usually do it. And for some reason, this one just totally worked. It was, the magazine really wanted to work with me, so they kind of basically got the location where I could meet them that filled my time zone. Like literally, I could only meet for like 3 hours, so they booked a place on Fifth Avenue and New York City just for me, so I could got the talent and the hair and wardrobe and makeup all there just so I could shoot it. So that was pretty awesome.
That's awesome. Well, that's cool. I guess you got a whole week's worth of work in one day, so you can take the rest of the week off, right? I got a lot of stuff
to put on social media and web now. I got some good stuff.
Nice.
Good stuff.
And are you fully recuperated now, or are you still kind of groggy?
I took a nap that literally for 6 hours and then slept that night completely through. So I'm almost back.
All right, awesome. Well, we got a great show for you all tonight. We've got 2 awesome guests, both of which are named David. So you got 3 Davids on the show, 3 Davids for the price of 1. So you should definitely
3 Davids and a Travis.
That's right. Well, you're an honorary David for today's show. So let's say 4 Davids. David. There you go. We'll call you David T. Anyways.
Little Dave.
So we'll start with our returning guest, David H. Wells. Hello, David. How are you?
Hey, how you doing? Nice to be here. Nice to meet you, Travis.
Pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
And David, you're joining us from your remote location. Would you like to tell the audience where you're from? Where you're at right now?
Should I refer to it as a secret location, which I cannot tell you, or should I admit that I'm in Bangalore, India, which is warm and sunny? And David Murphy, you might remember, my wife is from India, so I'm here doing a mix of some family visiting, some work, and then I teach a photo workshop starting at the end of the week.
Cool. So it's a little business and pleasure, right?
A lot of business, some pleasure, and a lot of video editing in between. I've been sitting at the computer a lot.
Oh, what kind of workshop?
It's a travel photography workshop. Americans come.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I've been to South India about 50 times in the last 25 years.
Wow.
I had 2 Fulbright fellowships on your tax dollars, gentlemen. I squandered your money pretty diligently, almost always here in South India. It's my favorite part of India. Yeah, thank you, David. So hopefully I can get some more tax money out of you guys in the future. So.
Oh, well, that's one place on my bucket list I haven't been yet. So.
It's a great place.
It's okay. I've been sent all over the world on the Americans' tax dollars. So thank you,
That's
U.S. military.
That's right.
In fact, I'm going to Korea here this summer, so wish me luck out there.
Doing something wrong.
No. So David, you're doing a workshop down there. Have you already started the workshop?
Workshop starts on Friday. I've been doing some scouting, having some meetings, going to places that I love to photograph. So when I'm here with the students, we're prepared, because I'm used to, we're used to working on our own. You go out, you photograph something, somebody tells you to do a job, you do it on your own. But when you're going there with a group of people, it just takes a little more preparation and a little more organization. So that's what I've been working on.
Was there a main focus for the workshop?
No, it's really just South India, and this is my favorite part of this fabulous country.
The only focus for the workshop is in.
Is in, yes.
In. That's the only focus that matters. Is this a workshop for local natives, or is it for like tourists, coming into the country? Who's the workshop for?
The workshop is pretty much exclusively for Americans who are coming over. I have a fairly loyal clientele. I teach workshops in Italy. I teach workshops in Morocco. And so about half the group of people I've worked with before who wanted to see what I think of as my India. Because we're not doing the Taj Mahal, we're not doing the landmarks, and those are beautiful places. But if you want to photograph people and you want to just interact, you want to do street photography, you want to see the places, you want to go to a place where everybody's really welcoming. And the South is much more welcoming than the North. It's a little bit like the U.S. The population density is different. The North is more industrial. The South is a lot more laid back. I prefer the food down here. So this is really sort of first time I've ever been able to do come see my India.
Nice. You should go to a call center and just yell at them for making like our lives hell here. I literally half a dozen calls a day, spam calls on my work phone and my personal phone. It's pretty annoying. But anyways, well, enjoy India. Good morning over there, because I know it's in the morning over there for you. So have a wonderful day. Of course, we got to introduce our new guest this week, brand new to the show, Mr. David Bateau.
Buteau.
Buteau.
Good enough. Close enough, yeah. You got the David. You were spot on with that, so it's cool, yeah.
I practiced the David. I didn't practice the Buteau.
That's okay. That's all right.
All that time we were waiting for the...
I struggled with it myself. That's okay.
All that pre-episode discussion, I didn't once think to practice pronouncing your last name. I apologize.
I think we'll just call you David.
David.
Cool.
I'm going to call you David B. Like Cardi B, but David B. And David W.
Yeah.
David, please tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your background.
So I'm a photojournalist, David and Travis. I've been doing this work since I was in high school, and I was lucky enough when I was a senior in high school to get an internship at the Dallas Morning News, which is where I grew up. And that's kind of how I got my start. And I learned really, it was almost like on-the-job training. I didn't have any formal photography training in high school or college, really. But I learned from the photographers there when I was a teenager. We were shooting slide film in those days. It was one of the first newspapers in the country to use color extensively. So that was pretty, it was pretty rigorous. Incident light here, to get my exposures down, and I just felt very lucky to have been able to learn from those photographers. And when I was in college, I did a few internships every summer. I would go to a different city or different newspaper, and by the time I got out of school, had a little bit of experience underneath my belt, and I started out working in Los Angeles at the LA Times in one of their suburban bureaus, and kind of did that as a quasi-staff contract photographer for a few years, and then started freelancing for magazines in the 90s. So that's what I've been doing since then, doing primarily photojournalism, but like a lot of other photographers, I do a variety of work as well, kind of corporate photography and other things that aren't strictly news and documentary and that kind of thing. So I worked as a contract photographer for U.S. News and World Report for 15 years, up until about 2008. And that was really a terrific job. I went all over the world for them and just had a chance to do things that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. All the kind of traveling and the kind of stories I was able to cover. So since then, it's been kind of a mixture of working for magazines, doing the corporate work again. When Trump was elected president, I thought this would be a very interesting time to work in Washington, D.C. I had covered politics. I'd done political conventions. And of course, as a photojournalist, a lot of what you do is you're photographing people and sort of the result of public policy and how just ordinary people are affected by decisions that are made in the halls of government. But I'd never actually been to the halls of government to see what that was like. And I had the same curiosity about it that I think you or a lot of other people might have who maybe haven't had a chance to work here before, is kind of like what goes on just outside the frame of the TV camera. Like if you're watching a hearing or you're watching a briefing at the White House, you see what's in the frame, but like, what are the staffers doing? What are the journalists doing? What are the politicians doing when they're not on camera? It was really just this kind of curiosity that drew me to move here and to just try to immerse myself in this environment for a couple of years. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Dave,
what was
do
the
me a
one thing
favor.
you found most surprising?
Hold on one second. Dave, move your microphone up. It's slightly brushing against your collar. on your
Oh,
shirt. So
got it.
just be careful.
Okay,
There you go.
got it. Sorry.
No, yeah,
Okay.
move it,
How's
move
that?
it
It's
over
behind
the
the
collar.
collar.
It's behind the collar. There you go. No,
Other side.
over the collar. Over the collar.
It in.
It's the little white thing.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like here?
Over.
Is that
Yeah, but
good?
it has to be in.
Yeah.
Inside?
There you
Yep.
go. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
How's
right.
that?
Perfect.
Is that brushing or is it okay? I'll try
It's
not
good
to
now.
move too much. Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry about the technical problem.
No, it's okay. That's what we love the show for. Technical problems. All right, Travis, you asked a
Yeah.
question, please.
I was just wondering. You said obviously what you see on the camera. Well, what was one of the most surprising things you entered out of curiosity off camera
What was one of the things that I saw off camera?
that you found you were very intrigued about what happens in that room, and in terms of like, was there anything that you witnessed or experienced being in that circumstance? Like, wow, I had no idea that was happening. Or
Some behind the
I'm
scenes
not
stuff.
Yeah. I'm not sure there was any one thing where it was just like, oh wow, that's amazing. But I really like just looking at the details in some of these situations. Probably the first big hearing that I did was James Comey in 2017. I forget. I think that was in May or June. How's the sound, by the way?
Perfect.
Is it okay right now?
Perfect.
Okay. So yeah, that was it's in a very large hearing room on Capitol Hill. And in order to kind of get a good spot to shoot from and everything, you have to be there a couple hours ahead of time. So I really enjoyed just watching the preparations for a hearing like that, and what the police are doing, and what the staffers are doing, and how they vary, like, where the senators sit. There's like a dais, right, that's kind of curved, and before, about an hour before the hearing, there's staffers that come and lay down a pen and a notepad and a glass of water, like with a coaster on it, like very meticulously at each spot where each one of these senators are going to sit. So, I think overall the sense of protocol that I see is pretty interesting. If you're reading the news, or especially if you're watching cable news or something, right now you get you might get a sense of like, oh, things are just, they're unraveling, and our government's in disarray, which in some ways it is. Like in a deep way, you could maybe make an argument like that, but on this kind of the superficial level, like almost like the institutional level of how things are conducted, particularly on Capitol Hill, there's a formality to it that was kind of unexpected, and I do enjoy just seeing that, and there is something a little bit reassuring about it, I think.
Okay. Well, since we're on the subject of Capitol Hill and working on it, let's go right into the topic we're going to start with this evening's show on, and that's talking about the photograph that was featured in the Time Top 100. And for any of our online viewers, I'm going to switch to the camera for the computer here. I'll bring that up, so you'll get to see this. But basically, what we're looking at here, for those of you who may not see it or are only listening to us, is a photograph of Jeff Flake, who is surrounded by fellow GOP senators Lindsey Graham and also others, and it's on September 28th, and it's moments after Flake called for a delay in the Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation. And the quote, the caption here says, "His change of heart proved brief. 8 days later, he joined a slim majority to elevate Kavanaugh to the bench." So, David, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit of the background of this photograph, and kind of like, what's going on here, and then kind of talk a little bit about being featured on Time's Top 100 list.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to get an assignment for Time magazine to shoot the Kavanaugh hearings. I think I'm trying to remember exactly what the timing of it was. I think he was on the Hill for 2 days initially for the confirmation hearings, and then at some point, like about a week later, I think it was this. There was the allegation of sexual assault. And Christine Blasey Ford came in from California to testify. And that particular hearing where she testified, unfortunately, I couldn't get into that. It was a very limited situation. I think there were just 5 or 6 photographers that were allowed to do that. Originally, her agreement was she only wanted one camera or her request was she only wanted one camera in that hearing room, and they couldn't quite accommodate that. It was a little unrealistic with TV cameras and all that. But yeah, so I never saw her, but but later that day, Kavanaugh, gave his sort of rebuttal to that, and then there was a hearing in the Judiciary Committee to decide whether or not to proceed with the nomination process, which is basically the committee says, okay, we're going to vote on this guy to send it to the full Senate for confirmation. And it was, the Republicans hold a slim majority on the committee. And it was, if every senator had voted along party lines, he would have gone straight to the Senate. They would have rubber stamped it onto the next stage. Everybody knew he was going to get approved. But that day, the day of the hearing that I shot that picture, Jeff Flake and then Senator Chris Coons, who's a Democrat, kind of had a closed-door meeting, the two of them, and they worked out a deal where they thought, well, let's call for a 1-week delay to let the FBI investigate. So this was there was a buzz on the Hill about a half an hour or an hour before that committee was called back into hearing that something was going on, that something unexpected was happening. And it was one of the rare situations. Sound okay, by the way, before I continue to go on?
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, it was one of the rare situations where in a hearing like that, you actually see something happening where in real time, because most of the time these deals are worked out behind the scenes, and by the time the senators or politicians come out, there's a little bit of an aspect of theater to it, but everybody knows what's going to happen. Here was a case where people actually didn't know what was going to happen, and there was a lot of tension in that room, and the senators, everybody was in their chairs on the dais except for Jeff Flake. And we knew that something was going on with Flake and that possibly he was going to do something or say something that was going to slow down the process. Fronted by a couple of people in an elevator day. So the hearing was really quick. I mean, it didn't take more than, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. And it was very clear after Flake came in that there's something was up, and that he at that point in the hearing, he called for that 1-week delay, which was a big surprise. And in my mind, I thought, well, he's clearly the most important person in the room right now. And what I was really interested in was to see how his fellow Republican senators were going to react to this moment, because we knew the Democratic senators would be pretty upbeat about what he did, but he's sitting on the Republican side. So what was going to happen? So I had kind of planted myself right in front of his chair, and then as soon as the gavel came down, which means that I can stand up and start taking pictures, I just got up and immediately just aimed my camera at him and was just kind of pressing the button down as other senators started to come around him. And there were other photographers that got similar frames, and all of our pictures are a little bit different. So it was a very rewarding moment, I think, because it was I think one of the it was very unusual to really see something that spontaneous happen here as you're covering things. So
I'm curious about one thing. I mean, as a journalist, you cover a lot of events, and it's rare that you get one that is going to be historic. And that anticipation, how is it different going into something that automatically is going to be historic, and then having something unexpected happen as well? Do you go in sort of like it's like an actor knowing that, wow, this film's going to be an Oscar? Or, it's like, what was different for you in the prep and anticipation versus what you actually ended up with?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, it definitely makes me nervous. If I think that there's a possibility that it's going to end up being historic, I was very glad that I had spent several months working on the Hill prior to that hearing. I mean, if that was like the first hearing like that I'd ever done, and I didn't really know what the protocol was, but I'd shot in that room numerous times before. I kind of knew, I had a sense of like where I could go and what the angles might be and where the other senators, how people come and go from that room. So I had a sense of how the action was going to unfold, which helped a lot. So at that point, then it's just a question of like, okay, do I have my exposure right? Am I in focus? And, just hoping you're just going to get something, that works out. And it, in that case, it did. I mean, it's not me. It's just that the people, in the shot just happened to be kind of well graphically arranged. And, that's sort of what made it. So, yeah.
So it's interesting, you mentioned that this was a moment that was not anticipated, or at least, again, a moment of surprise, right? Because, like you said, he was in a closed door meeting and there was this buzz, and then it happened, and then, you stood up and you got this photograph. Could you discern the mood and of the fellow senators around him and the mood of Jeff Flake? I mean, or were you just focused on grabbing frames, like you weren't really paying attention to what people were saying or how people were reacting to Jeff? Or could you tell, like, you could feel sort of the mood around Jeff?
Right. That's a really interesting question, because I think David Wells, we've worked together in foreign countries before, and sometimes in situations that are a little tense and things are unfolding right in front of you. And kind of as photojournalists, I mean, I think the skill that you develop over the years is to be able to, I don't want to call it a sixth sense exactly, but it's kind of like, you're looking at people's body language, you're looking at their facial expressions, you're trying to get a sense of how they're interacting. I think that I try to do it by using empathy or maybe a little bit of projection, like I'm imagining what this person might be thinking at this moment or how they might be reacting to the situation. So in real time, and then also trying to anticipate what they're going to do next. So I think it happens very fast. So, I mean, there's parts of your brain that are processing all this stuff that you're not really conscious of. And I think, I don't know if you guys would agree with that, but that's sort of part of being a photographer. I mean, it's like, it's almost instinctual in a way that you're not cerebrally deconstructing every little nuance. It's just all getting absorbed. And you're trying to make really quick decisions about what you want to put in the frame and when you want to press a button. I mean, essentially, that's what you're doing.
Well, yeah, it's like in any sort of like instance like that where you're focused on composition and moment and stuff, and then you get back to the, you're back to your computer, you're doing your selects, and then you realize just how significant everything was, or you realize the gravity of what you were doing. So, what was it? I'm sorry, go ahead. Was somebody?
Sure, I was going to ask a question, David Butow. Some question around the idea both that we started early on in Los Angeles and Southern California and sort of scripted reality or shows or theater or performance. And I'm just curious if you found a lot of overlap. I mean, there's an argument that a lot of politics is performance and theater. And I'm curious if the training that we had by accident when we were young helped, hurt, if you find similarities at all.
The training for
just because working around the film industry in Southern California.
Oh, I see.
Which is a kind of controlled environment, and everything I've read about politics is also a controlled environment. But what's different, what's similar.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't really thought about that because it's been so long since I've been around, kind of the entertainment industry and working in LA. But I think that I find it a little bit more true than that. I mean, I think if you're on a film set or doing stuff that's kind of around Hollywood, it's assumed that everything is an act and that actors are pretending to be somebody else. I don't really think politicians are doing that, and I think most of the time in these hearings, there is a certain. I think they're genuine most of the time. They might be just dialing stuff up a little bit, but I don't think they're really necessarily saying one thing and just pretending something. So yeah, it's an interesting idea though. But what I really enjoy in these situations is it's trying to get a read of the room and trying to get a sense of it. To me, it's like it's not just about politics and it's not just about news. I try to think, well, here, let's say if it's a hearing with a dozen senators, here are just 12 people, just 12 human beings that just like anybody else, have certain desires and are thinking about certain outcomes that they would like to happen, as related to the politics or whatever it is that they're talking about. So you're trying to read that, and sometimes they've had good relationships with other people, other politicians in that room, and sometimes it's been contentious. So you're trying to suss out where things might be at any given moment. You're trying to, again, read people's facial expressions or body language. And in this case, in that particular hearing, it was like it was very clear that emotions were kind of raw. So yeah.
How much are you battling the other photographers? What's the hierarchy of and how many photographers in there? And it's very different in a situation like that than say a red carpet or there's so many different. What's the politics of those photojournalists right there?
Yeah, no, that's interesting too. There are a lot of still photographers who are credentialed for Capitol Hill. So in a typical hearing, there might be, let's say, a half a dozen photographers there. A hearing that's really newsy, kind of like everybody wants to be there. So the hearing room where I shot that picture of Flake is a pretty small room, and when there's a big witness like Comey, let's say, or Mark Zuckerberg, the Senate staff who kind of coordinates all the still photography, they will mark down spots along the dais that there is kind of a hierarchy, and it starts with the wire services, and then the New York Times and the Washington Post, and then it kind of goes out from there. So once you get to that point, that's like 12. Maybe 15 photographers. I think in that judiciary hearing there were at that time there were probably about a dozen, and we were sort of seated in different places. But Flake was really the only person I was interested in, so I just made sure that I was sitting kind of like in front of him during the hearing, and then as soon as, like I said, as soon as the gavel comes down, you're allowed to stand up, and then so that I kind of positioned myself. So as soon as the gavel came down, like where they were, the other half kind of came around to where I was. So yeah, you can see some pictures of it, and we're absolutely, literally shoulder to shoulder. And what's interesting is like all of our pictures are different. That's what's so cool about it, because we're using different lenses. We're just changing the composition slightly. Yeah. So. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because you can get a bunch of different angles. If it were me, like sitting down there, I would have done one of these. I would have just raised my camera. I'm still sitting. I'm still sitting. I'm following the rules.
Oh man, no, we do that all the time, dude. Absolutely. And before digital, thank God for the live view on the camera. Because right. I was not really into using live view. Yeah, listen, all the time. Okay, all the time. So I was, so I was in the White House today, photographing one of these briefings, and it's so packed in there. Seeing it on TV just doesn't do it justice. And so you're just looking for any kind of variation that you can make with your angle, because you just can't really move around. You just don't have that. You just don't have that freedom. So if you can move your camera and like put it so that your camera is aimed through somebody's elbow or whatever to kind of frame it, people do that kind of stuff all the time.
Let me ask you this, David. Did you had forethought and you like, okay, I gotta get this Jeff Flake guy on camera. That's going to be the newsworthy shot. Were the other folks next to you also having that same forethought, or were they like, oh man, Dave is getting the shot. Oh, I need to get that same shot. Were they like, after they? Yeah,
they pretty much just follow me. Whatever I do, that's where everybody else.
Oh yeah, okay. So you're trendsetter.
What's Dave doing today?
Yeah, no, I think that I would say it's funny because I like somebody had sent me a clip of this on C-SPAN, so I watched it at the very end of the hearing. And I'd say about half of the photographers just immediately had the same idea that I did, and the other half weren't really sure where the best action might be. So it's just one of those things. It's like sometimes, you're clicked in and thinking about it, and I miss stuff all the time. So,
Well, you didn't miss this one. So obviously they chose your photo out of all the other photographers who were there and captured different angles. And I thought, looking at it, I think it's a great angle. I think you got, and I think the reason they chose is because you got a great straight on shot, pretty much, of Jeff. You can see, his both his eyes. You can see him turning towards Lindsey Graham, who of course was a very fiery person during the conference and during the event. And he just got this sort of almost like not like Last Supper feel to it. It's again where everybody's around Jeff. So tell me what it was like. Having your photo featured on Time.
Oh no, it was really cool because I remember that day I was pretty exhausted because it was the second day that I'd been working, and there were a lot of protests at the Supreme Court, like over those 2 days. So I was kind of going, Travis, you had like a long period of shooting where you were like, you just mentioned that you had a bunch of shoots packed in a small time frame, and you get kind of like fried, and sometimes your eyes and your mind aren't totally clued in. So I was editing the pictures right after the thing, and I found like a dozen pictures of different things from that hearing and from other things that I had shot like the previous couple of hours. And I can't say that particular frame really stood out at me in that moment. I thought, well, that looks pretty good, but I didn't really think, oh, this is, anything it's particularly special. I was just glad that I got it. And then when I sent it in, the photo editor at Time just immediately said, wow, that's a really good picture. So no, I was just very pleased that it was part of the collection of tremendous photojournalistic pictures that have been taken, in the U.S. and then of course around the world from that past year. It's not like a hardcore news picture in the sense that it's not violent and it doesn't depict something terrible happening. It's really just kind of a nuanced moment. But just to have it be part of that was great. Yeah, absolutely.
It's quite an accomplishment to be part of the archives of a historical moment in U.S. history that it's going to be looked back upon, and to capture that moment.
It says here Redux for Time. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is Redux?
Redux is a photo agency. So they're based in New York City, and most magazine photographers and photojournalists who are freelancers like I am use a photo agency to distribute their work after it's shot. So different kinds of photojournalistic contracts when you're shooting for wires or publications, there are differences, and sometimes there's a shared copyright. Sometimes with some wire services, the photographer completely gives up their copyright. And in that case, the agency essentially owns the picture. So they're free to distribute it, and the photographer never gets any resale on that picture. But I try to basically just virtually everything I do, I try to own the copyright to my work. So the agency just becomes the vehicle after it's been distributed to the client. The picture can then, depending on possible embargoes and things like that, can be sold to other publications and forever. And it also serves as as a permanent digital archive for the work, which is very reassuring in case something were to happen to my copies. There's always going to be something there. So that's what Redux is, and there are, maybe a half a dozen of these fairly, large agencies around the world. Well, a little bit more than that, but in the U.S., let's say, and they're one of them.
Would it be
David Murphy, if I may, for a future show?
Yes.
I would be curious to have somebody further conversation with David Butow about agencies, because, for example, I'm with Aurora, which was just sold to Cave-In Images, and I don't think you've done anything on that yet. And I think that that long ongoing consolidation downward would be a point of, I think would be an interesting discussion. I'd certainly be happy to sit in on it, though I'm kind of on the sidelines. I think David Butow being in the front of that activity would be curious. It's good to hear that they're still. I'm assuming basically it's still generally a good relationship for you, David Buteau, to work with Redux.
Yes, it is. Sure. Yeah, certainly. It's better than not having copyright. And Redux, what they also all of the resale for the New York Times pictures, for example, so that typically staff photographers at newspapers, they don't, or wire services don't own the copyright to their work. They get paid a salary, and everything they shoot for the wire service or the newspaper then becomes owned by the paper. So Redux worked out a fairly unique arrangement a few years ago with the New York Times to basically act as the selling vehicle, the machinery, if you will, to distribute that work. So that there's an online archive of all the stuff that's been shot for the New York Times in the last few years that Redux hosts. They also handle all of the resale for the agency 7 and Noor, I think, NOOR, that agency, and a couple of others, I think. And there's certain, there's also like international agreements with like European and Asian agencies that have kind of cooperative agreements. So basically the agency serves as a way for you to get your stuff anywhere. And generally, like when people call me and they want to buy a picture for something, if it's like a textbook or a magazine article or something like that, I'll just refer them to the agency. But mostly what they do is they just function on their own. So clients that are looking for a particular picture, they'll search the online archives of these different agencies, just like they would Aurora or whatever.
Yeah, I worked for an agency back when I lived in New York City. And do you mind if I ask, David, if you're even allowed to reveal it? What's your split?
Well, let's see. The resale split is 50-50.
Okay.
So
that was the same split for me in my agency. Mm-hmm. I got 50% of whatever the sale was. And, with my work was a little bit higher in demand at the time. And so, not my personal work, but like the way our work was sold was essentially different magazines or entities who wanted to publish it would bid on it. And so the highest bidder would get the work. And so that could be very lucrative, or it could be, sometimes not as lucrative, depending on how exclusive what I got was.
Yeah, exactly. Exclusivity is really is really important.
Yeah. Does that work the same way? I mean, like, if you get something awesome with like Jeff Flake, and he's doing something nobody else is around, you get something him doing whatever. You get somebody doing something. Is that something where the agency is going to go to bat and try and like sell your work at a higher price? Or is it basically all same price for people who want your work?
I think they could, if there's something really unusual. Yeah, I think they could work out certain deals, and sometimes like a publication would be willing to pay more if it's exclusive. Because most of the time when they're buying something, it's not exclusive.
Yeah.
They just want to buy it and use it. But I think you could do a year's worth of shows like this about nothing but the business of agencies and how all that has changed, particularly in the last 10 years. I mean, it's a combination of a lot of different things, but just digital distribution made a huge impact in our industry, as did Getty Images, for example. I mean, 15 years ago, or a little bit more than that, Getty Images didn't exist. And so the kind of the split of say newspaper and wire photography and magazine photography was very noticeable.
Yeah.
And that's just not the case anymore, because everybody's shooting color, everybody's getting their stuff out really fast, and kind of the Getty model has changed things tremendously, and frankly has brought the price of imagery down significantly. I mean, at least relative to inflation, and maybe not even relative. It's just brought it down, period, because it's increased the volume of pictures. So the odds of getting something exclusive are much more diminished than they would have been 20 years ago.
So you're saying is, if I want to differentiate myself within the industry, shoot black and white and be very slow about it.
Yeah, and tilt the camera. Well, actually, Getty photographers tilt the camera too. So
They do
yeah,
that
it's
too,
really
so,
hard
yeah.
to differentiate
I'm
yourself.
not sure if it's
Yeah,
on
Yeah,
purpose.
black
though.
and white, slow. You know.
Dutch angle. Dutch angle. Did you shoot anything with Brett Kavanaugh?
Yeah.
How was
Yeah.
that? Were you in there when he was doing the fairy like I like beer?
Oh, he totally. No, I wasn't in there for that.
Oh, no.
I was watching it on TV. I was, just mouth agape watching that. Unfortunately, I was not in that particular. I'd shot him for the first couple of days before all these allegations came out. So he was pretty composed when I photographed him.
Because there's so many,
I can only
so
see
many
Matt
great
Damon
shots.
doing it now.
So many great shots of him just having these expressions of like anger and vitriol against his perceived, how dare you question my background? But
there were some good memes comparing that with like photographs of certain woodland animals and things. So
But
what we do.
Right.
talking about shooting like any hearing or anything in that, I mean, you're pretty much just locked into one position for like what, hours, and you just gotta shoot from the one angle. How do you like differentiate that? How do you like find creativity in that, or is it just in the moments you shoot?
Well, that's a good question. You're not really locked into just one spot. So in a big hearing, or a really very newsy hearing, like let's say Kavanaugh, Comey, Zuckerberg. Sorry, my light is flickering. In the beginning, you are locked in because all the photographers want to be there in the beginning, and they want to get their shot and get some good pictures and then send them out. But what happens is after about a half an hour, the photographers start to go to look for other angles around the room. So yeah, you're kind of locked down initially where the dais is, and all these spots are taped down. But you can shoot from other positions in the room, just not kind of in the view of the TV cameras. But you can shoot from the back, you can shoot from the sides, and some of the hearing rooms, like the big hearing room, where like Comey was, for example, and Kavanaugh initially, there are these like elevated positions and sort of cutouts along the side wall, so you can go up there and shoot from there. So like, after 30 minutes, 45 minutes, a lot of the photographers are dispersed, and then you can move around and get different angles. But yeah, initially, you're crammed in there, and you're just trying to, shoot them like this, and shoot them like this. Shoot them tight, shoot them loose. There's only so many possibilities.
Horizontal, vertical, Dutch angle.
Yeah, Dutch angle. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
What's Mark Zuckerberg like in real life?
He's much more pale than you would expect. I think that was the thing that really struck me, and he has really smooth skin. There's just no imperfections in that man's skin. But he's very focused guy. You can see how he got to be one of the richest men in the world. I mean, he's pretty smart. So very, very smart, very focused. Yeah.
Nice.
So David B., how long did it take you to kind of learn that protocol of the gavel and where you sit and that routine that you described pretty easily a second ago, but were I to move there and start the process, not that I'm planning on it, by the way, but how long did it kind of take you to learn the drill for how do you photograph those kinds of events?
Oh, it was a few weeks for sure. When you're working on Capitol Hill, some of what you're doing is these hearings, but there are other situations that get repeated that you end up photographing. There's kind of an informal press conference in a hallway once a week. So the way that's set up and where you're allowed to shoot from, and there are a lot of rules, like about places you're not even really supposed to aim your camera, like at the doors of the Senate chambers, for example, which is something I didn't even know until I got there. So yeah, it was a bit of a learning curve.
Is there a good reason for that?
I'm not sure, but the thing is,
do not show doors.
You can't show the doors. You can't photograph inside the chambers at all, actually.
Yeah. Did you find other photographers generous with their information in terms of your learning curve?
Very generous. I got to say, that's one thing about it, is that it's extremely collegial up there, and people are great, and they're just very welcoming, even though I was this dude who showed up from out of town. And no, everybody was really cool. So yeah, that was great.
Did you ever anybody like to be like, listen up, rookie? This is how it is, all right? You get to sit down there, you get to take your photos, and you only got to stand up when they bang that gavel, all right, Ricky?
Well, I'm done.
That's right. And there's also I mean, one of the interesting things I didn't really know about either, but there's a team of 4 people who work for the Senate whose job it is to kind of corral us. And let me change my wording on that. They're not really corralling us. They're sort of serving as an intermediary between the photographers and the police and the staffers at the Senate who don't want us to do stuff. So sometimes things become like a little bit of a bargaining situation. Like, we like, if there's something going on in a particular hallway and we like to line up against this wall, that's where we'd like to be as the photographers. But some of the either the police or some Senate staff be like, oh, you can't do that. You're blocking the way. It's against the rules. Sometimes the people that work it's called the Senate Press Photographers Gallery will sort of negotiate this and help us. So they're the ones that kind of showed me, if ever I had a question about what I could or couldn't do, I could just go to them and ask them, which I still do all the time, actually. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Nice. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to our next topic this evening. We got a lot of other things to talk about, but we may, again, touch back on this. I love to talk about cameras. I love to talk about Micro Four Thirds cameras. I love the GH5. I'm legally obligated to talk about at least once per show, even though we don't get sponsored by Panasonic. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, Panasonic. Come on. Give us some of that sponsorship love. Anyways.
I'm a Sony guy, right?
What's that?
I'm a Sony guy.
That's right. You are a Sony guy. By the way, Dave, what do you shoot with? Before we go on.
I shoot with Leicas and Nikon.
All right. I'm sorry for your loss. Yeah. All right. Moving on. Hey, no, I love the Leicas. I love Nikon. I've shot with Nikon. Great camera. By the way, are you intrigued by, or have you switched to the sort of mirrorless Nikon? Has that been something that intrigues you?
I'm intrigued by it. I haven't got a chance to shoot with it though. Yeah, I just haven't gotten a chance. But I am intrigued. Yeah, I have one mirrorless Leica, the SL, and so I do like mirrorless cameras. So yeah, no, I'm keeping my options open with cameras. But I do, just getting back to the Leica thing, I've used Leica rangefinders, for 20 years, and there's something about just the way you shoot and view when you're looking through that window. And I don't use that for everything, but some stuff it's just right. So yeah.
Cool.
That's what I shot the flake picture on, actually.
Oh, you did? Okay, that was my question.
What's that? Right? You shot what picture on it?
So, not the most modern sensor or the fastest camera in the world. I like using it. So.
Cool. Well, we're talking about, I'll bring it up here, the Olympus unveils its OM-D E-M1X Pro Micro Four Thirds camera. So I think this is pretty neat. I've never seen a Micro Four Thirds sort of camera with a body similar to, sort of a professional body like the D5 or something like that. It's definitely interesting to see sort of this large body with a small sort of sensor. I think I have the same thing with my GH5 and a battery grip. Personally, I think I can emulate the same thing right now. But it is interesting because, again, we normally see these type of cameras with the battery grip or with the, again, built-in battery grip is sort of the professional level. But, it's pretty standard specs from what I can read from this article from Petapixel, talking about a 20 megapixel sensor. It is, probably got better weather sealing than if you were to throw a battery grip on a regular Micro Four Thirds camera, I'm sure. But what are your all thoughts on this? Is this something that interests you? Would you move to this Pro Micro Four Thirds body, or are you pretty much happy with what you've got currently?
Well, I'm going to jump in first because I actually am an Olympus user, so I sort of get the nod on this one.
Nice.
So I've been using the Micro Four Thirds and the predecessor to this camera, the EMD OM1. The names get longer by the hour. Mark II. And in terms of the sensor and all that, I've been doing this stuff for a long time, which is the same size sensor, David Murphy, you have on your Panasonic. So I've pretty much been completely committed to the Micro Four Thirds sensor size. I got a whole bag of lenses. Now I'm on 3 bodies. I looked at it. I don't do that much sports and action stuff, so that being its main strong suit, it doesn't inherently attract me. But it's interesting to see Olympus sort of as a business model go that way, because Panasonic, for example, just brought out their first of the full frame bodies, which is going to negate all our micro four thirds lenses. So I find it interesting that Panasonic says, nope, I think we're going to have to go with the full frame sensor. Olympus has said, no, we're going to double down on sticking with the small sensor and see who bites. And only time will tell. But that was actually, for me, the most interesting thing was the sort of business approach rather than the particulars of this camera, because I don't do enough sports to justify getting a whole new camera.
I mean, it's like there's a lot of people who have committed to micro four thirds lens sets. Like I've got 5 lenses for micro four thirds, but on the other hand, the S1R and full frame mirrorless is kind of the way of the future. So it's really tough for me not to want to sell my every single thing I own and go to micro four or go to full frame. But I can definitely see if you're committed to micro four thirds, this might be something that attracts you. You said you use Nikon and Leica there, David B. What is there any attraction to move to the micro four thirds, or is there any attraction to move to the mirrorless? You said you're intrigued by what Nikon and Canon. Well, again, this mirrorless revolution, is this something you might kind of invest in?
Yeah, I think so. The four thirds is interesting because I did have a Lumix, the GH, I forget which GH it was, and I was using it for video primarily, and that's really what drew me into the mirrorless stuff in the beginning, and I just thought it was great. And the idea of getting certain magnification from a telephoto, but having the actual physical size of it being much smaller, I think is really cool. And just, some of the Olympuses look really nice, very just compact. And I just never, it was always like I had a couple of other systems and I just never made that investment. But I'm definitely interested in the Lumix because I do have one Leica that has that L mount. So I'm very much looking forward to that camera when it comes out, to trying it out. Yeah,
I am very much like potentially going to sell every single piece of gear I currently own that's micro four thirds as soon as they announce the Lumix. But on the other hand, I'm also like, maybe I should wait for the reviews to come out, because they have said that this isn't like the video camera. Like they want the GH series will continue on, and there'll be a GH6. But I don't know. I kind of want that full frame action. Travis, you've been living in the full frame life in the Sony world, but obviously everybody complains about the fact that the Sonys can't create a grip to save their life. What are your thoughts on this camera? Or what are your thoughts on the full frame, do you wish Sony would come out with like a full, vertical grip camera?
It's definitely a good question. I've certainly played with a lot. I have a full system on Fuji. I have a full system, several systems on Sony. Sony is probably the best all-around camera I've ever used. I think the micro four thirds is interesting because of the lens size and the size, but once you start making it big again, you're sort of negating what it is, and you might as well get a Sony. It's like, why not get the added? And when Sony comes out, they just came out with the A6500, and that thing is a beast on autofocus. And now that Sony's coming out with autofocus for animal eye recognition and human recognition, that it is so fast and spot on that it's hard not to go for the Sony. I think Sony started out with the full frame, trying to get into that mirrorless market and try to make their body small enough, and they were going for the size thing. And then suddenly they created an incredible camera that needs to be a little bigger. It needs to, take that space. It should have been what, the like the Canon 5D Mark IV and stuff like that. It needs a little bigger body size, and they've addressed putting different batteries in it and the sensor. But in terms of its video capabilities and photo capabilities all in one, you really can't just beat it. It's an incredible system.
No, I think Sony has done so much right, and honestly, they're the ones that all the other manufacturers are trying to emulate. And you've seen that with Canon and Nikon, and even with Panasonic going full frame.
And you have some some camera companies like Fuji and Sony that will give you a full-on firmware update, where Canon would not release and has not released updates, and basically would sell you a new camera, where Sony and Fuji are giving you those firmware updates and increasing. It's amazing with the firmware updates that are coming out for the new the A9 is going to be a beast of a camera with the new firmware update, and so will some of the other, the A7 III and the A7R3 doesn't get quite the boost, but it's going to get an amazing boost as well.
Is that going to change the image quality, or is that just going to be the functionality of the camera?
No, it's the A9 is getting the autofocus functionality of animal eye autofocus, plus a bunch of other stuff. The sensor is staying the same, and it's a beast of a sensor in there. But it's pretty incredible. And you have the Olympus sticking to their 4/3, just like Fuji sticking to their their sensor. Although they do a full frame, a medium format. They're saying they're not going to do a full frame. But what I like about the Fuji is that you can turn every single dial like an old camera before you even turn on the camera, which is that's wonderful. It's the closest you'll get to feeling like I'm using an old camera that has all these digital wonderful pluses.
I'm curious. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you guys a question who've been using mirrorless, especially David Wells, for years now. Does it change the way you shoot? The one thing that I've noticed a little bit is like when you're shooting outside in bright sunlight, I find it a little tricky. But, that's sort of almost like a separate question. But you feel like you're shooting any differently, or, is the experience, is it that much different from when you're using DSLRs?
Shooting outside in the bright sun is definitely a challenge with, I think, all the mirrorless. The OMD EM1 that I have, it does have a regular electronic pentaprism, so I can put it up to my eye and see through there, which I will do in bright sun. See, you've got the monitor that you see on the back of the camera. It also gives you the option of looking at it through an electronic pentaprism. And so if it's bright and sunny outside, you can do that. I do that a lot. The other reason I use that so much is it's great for editing, because if it's bright and sunny outside and you can't see the screen, you put it up to your eye and you can thumb through, and you've got a dark hole, if you will. So it actually works really well in that. I do find it, digital in general, and especially the mirrorless, particularly with the attenuated, the folding screen, like David Murphy was talking about. I just so routinely experiment with I'm 5'7.5". I experiment almost automatically with above or below or left or right, or
wow, that's really
something
interesting.
Weird. Just instantly, because I know A, there's no opportunity cost, and B, I can see it. And the last couple of generations, they've got focus peaking. You can set it so the exposure that you see is what you get. All this stuff. So I find, I actually really love. I was one of those guys who was not going to go digital. Back you talked about color slides back in the day. We used to get paid a lot of money because we had the ability to go around the world, like in Middle East, and make perfect color slides, which a lot of people couldn't do. So when digital came along and ruined that, I was not particularly happy. But of course now I love digital because of this added layer of ability, and I think the mirrors take that much further than the conventional mirrored cameras. So for me, at least, it's been great. I'm all for it.
I know with the Sony, so especially my beast of the A7R3, the bright setting on the EVF is insane. In fact, it's so bright, you can set it to bright that when I'm shooting with someone and they look at the back screen, they're like, "Oh, that's great," and then I'm like, look in the viewfinder, and every time you see their face go like this. It's almost it has this 3D quality, like, oh my God, like, look at this. It's unbelievable. And just the benefit of all the information you get on this screen in terms of if you want a histogram or if you want peaking, all of that kind of stuff, all that information, a level. There's so much, you can choose so much information. It's such a benefit. And it took me a while going from a Canon, the DSLR to the trusting, and it wasn't up to par, the EVF, up until recently. Now there's no blackout, on the A9s, there's zero blackout. It's bright, it's fast, the information. And now, I see what the picture is going to be before I take it. I don't even need to look at the picture because I know exactly what it's going to look like because I've seen it. Unless you're working with flash, then it's a whole different kind of, ball game, whether you're working with strobes or speed lights or stuff like that. But the best thing is that literally the connection of these. I was on a magazine shoot, and the talent there is, he has 7 million followers, a Disney actor, and Cameron Boyce, and we're shooting there. And I did this great shot where he's running down Fifth Avenue, and I literally was able to switch it to my phone, edit in Snapseed, send it to him right there, and he could post it all in a matter of seconds. And it was just to be able to do something that nowadays and get it out there so fast and capitalize on social media is unbelievable.
And I think one of the most important aspects of mirrorless is the ability to shoot silently, because it's like I look forward to the point when Trump and his successor are sitting together, and you have the scrum of all the media photojournalists, and it's completely silent because they're all shooting with mirrorless. Not like the complete smorgasbord of shutters that it was
Right.
Obama and Trump.
It changed because when I was shooting on film sets, before you had to put it in a Zeppelin, and you'd have to put it in a blimp, and this huge, terrible thing you'd have to. Now the Sony, you don't even hear it. And sometimes when I go from shooting behind the scenes or on an active film set where you can't have any, I can shoot right next to the sound guy. They can't hear it. But if I go to do some production stills of an actor and he can't hear it, you see them getting like, are you taking pictures? And you have to put the sound back on to make them feel at ease, because they're like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, it feels weird. It's like, so you actually have to put the sound back on, sort of like, like a Prius, that golf cart beeping. So, backing up.
Yes, speaker that's having a shutter. But we could probably talk for another hour about Micro Four Thirds. I know I could, but I did want to touch on our last topic this evening, which was regarding portfolio review. So the womenphotojournalists.org asked me to promote their 2019 WPOW seminar and portfolio review, which you can still get tickets for. The event is February 16th. I highly recommend you check it out if you're a women photojournalist, or male photojournalist. I don't really know if a male photojournalist can attend this, but again, regardless, the point I was bringing this up for is because of portfolio review. I have had my portfolio reviewed at events like the Northern Shore Course, which Travis is going to, and there's going to be a live public affairs. I'm sorry, there's going to be a live Around the Lens
podcast.
That's right, live podcast at Northern Shore Course. Check that out. But portfolio review in general, I'm biased personally. I promoted this link because I think portfolio review is important. I don't think there's anyone here who wouldn't agree that portfolio review is important. But again, what is the point of portfolio review? Do you think it actually makes a difference? From someone who's never had a portfolio review, kind of approach the topic in that sort of vein. It's like, why should I spend money or take time out to have somebody look at my portfolio? Let's start with you, Dave. What do you think? Have you ever had your portfolio reviewed by anybody, and did you find any benefit out of it?
Which one?
You.
David B. David B.
Come on, Dave.
No. I wanted David Wells to go first. I kind of, I have done it, and it can be a painful experience, even now. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing this, but I enjoy doing it with other photographers, and I think, I think it can be beneficial for everybody. I sort of liken it to professional musicians, artists. They have record producers, right? They don't. Most of them don't just go in there and make the record by themselves. Having another set of ears, and in this case, another set of eyes, to look at your stuff. It's not like they're necessarily just going to criticize stuff. Really, what I enjoy most about when I'm looking at somebody else's work, a student in particular, somebody who's trying to learn, trying to get sort of to the next level, is finding the things that they're trying to do that they may not even be aware of. That they're, it's that old expression, you can't see the forest for the trees. You're right in the middle of it, and sometimes you don't quite get how it's coming together or not quite coming together, but it's like making a sculpture. You've got some ideas, and it's a matter of fine-tuning it, and it's a matter of getting rid of the stuff that doesn't fit with your style or your concept or whatever you're trying to move forward with, and then you're trying to emphasize the things that are going to make your work more distinctive. So I think it's a great thing.
Okay.
So now I will jump in, and I completely agree with what David B. said. My experience is slightly different in the sense that when I started out, I did get portfolio reviews, and as David pointed out, they were often painful. And the measure of pain was a reflection of how my career progressed. I really used to look at it that way. So much so that the second half of my career, I've moved across the table and do the reviewing. And a couple things when I moved across the table was, one is I remember the old guys, because it was all guys then,
Mm.
beating me up. So I tried to always at least find one thing that's encouraging. And what you said, David, about ferreting out what makes that person unique is really, really important. My big issue with them is that they really are important at the entry level, because young photographers, as a rule, kind of have no idea what they're doing. And I went through that. It sounds like you went through that in Dallas. Everybody goes through that. So for me, the most important time to take them is when they're young. To be honest, I haven't been on the receiving end in quite a while, because in terms of getting work, it's more networking and that kind of stuff. But really getting somebody to say, this is what you've got to work on and this is what you're really good at. I've been beaten up by the best of them. I remember Bob Gilka back in the Stone Age beat me up, and then Rich Clarkson and Tom Kennedy. So, I've had really high-end people beat me up, and then as time went on, they became more complimentary and less derisive. So that's the key thing, and that's why I do think that they need to continue, especially because so many young people in photography these days work in isolation. The dark room. Remember the dark room? You go in, you process your film. I learned 90% of what I learned in the first 5 years at the LA Times, at the San Francisco Examiner, from, again, unfortunately, mostly guys sitting in a dark room, critiquing stuff on the spot. And portfolio reviews kind of do that same thing now, because we don't have dark rooms. We don't go and meet the way we used to. So I'm still in for it. Yeah.
That's great.
Well, I have to totally disagree with, but no, I'm just kidding. I've been on both sides now, and when I went back to school to International Center of Photography, the end of the 1 year general seminar, the 1 year you sit down and you get to meet with everybody from Time Magazine or Sports Illustrated, and I found it extremely beneficial. And exactly what you said is someone that just entering it. It's very important to go through the process of putting together a cohesive body of work that you're going to show. Go through the editing process and self-editing and putting something, a story together, and show that you can tell a series and not just take one picture, and get feedback, whether it be good or bad. Because if you get all the same bad feedback, they're onto something. But then again, you're going to get, sometimes you're going to show a body of work, and one person's going to say, this is the worst thing, this doesn't work, and you're going to sit down with the next person and go, this is fantastic, I love it. So you have to take it all with a grain of salt, but you have to take, if you hear repeated stuff and feedback, you have to take that. Now I'm sort of on the other side, being the chairman of APA, which is the American Photographic Artists. We do a couple mini portfolio reviews a year and a big portfolio review. It's one of the biggest things that our members look for, and one of the most beneficial things that they get. So what we've started to do also is pair up with people that are first-time portfolio reviewers. So not only are they getting experience, but now the photographer's getting experience. So we're kind of helping build and maintain and it's photographers for photographers. It's this networking and trying to help support a community it's a tough community now, where everybody has a camera phone and everybody has a camera. We have to learn how to tell a story. And the best way I explain photography is like when you learn a new language, you're going to I now know how to say, where's the bathroom in Spanish. But as you study, you learn different words and you learn the inflections, you know how to make something funny or not. It's the same thing with your work and presenting work. You have to learn how to tell that story and getting feedback. And you know what? You can get jobs. I got jobs out of portfolio reviews. So if you go in there, sometimes you get nothing, but sometimes you make great connections. And it may not be until 3 years down the line that you met, the person that was the editor here, and you're like, oh, but you have that. At least now you have their card, and you can say down the line, I have a new body of work. Would you take a look at it? You've already had that introduction. So it's important for future connections, not only the one that happens right there.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the last portfolio review I received was in Northern Shore course, actually, in I think 2009 or 2010 or something like that. And ultimately, the photographer who reviewed my work said, "Yep, you're looks like you're on the right path." They didn't really have anything too much to give me in terms of feedback. They were like, "Yeah, you dirt likely." So again, I definitely echo the point where this is for entry level for sure. For starting out, and you need that sort of critique. Again, I don't see either of the Daves here going to any sort of portfolio review anytime soon, because you're working photographers. You're getting paid for your work. Your stuff is reviewed every time you put it up online. and put up with your agency. You're working for an agency. So while it might be good to have an outsider kind of look at your work and critique it, you're getting paid to do what you're doing. You're a professional photographer. You're not necessarily dependent on that portfolio review. Whereas if you're, a college student, or if you're just starting out, you're looking to, improve. I'd say the first 5 years of your career is probably the most vital to get that portfolio review. And really, it's like talking about the importance of portfolio review. I'd say that first 5 years is the most important time to get it, because you can think you're doing great. You think you're like, hot stuff, but then you get out there in the real world and you realize, nope, you're not that much, you're not that great stuff. So, or, again, you may be doing work, you may be getting paid for it, but you're not producing the kind of work that separates you from the, all the other folks who are doing it, right? I mean, is that kind of like, am I on the right path there? Or am I kind of offbeat?
Yeah, that sounds right. And I think particularly with young photographers, and I did the same thing too for the first several years of my career. I was kind of trying to find myself in the sense that, I wanted to figure out what kind of photography I was going to do. But there's so many different types. There's a bazillion, there's infinite types of photography out there. So young photographers, I think, have a tendency to not focus themselves and not concentrate on a particular style or subject matter or whatever it is. And they're kind of all over the place. And I was at many times as well. So a review can help you.
I'll throw
narrow that.
one other thing out there on terms of not just being a young photographer, but being a seasoned photographer. Just like a comedian that can be famous and do tons and tons of sets, they go to small clubs and work on material. So sometimes bringing a body of work that you're still working on, that you want feedback on, is a good place to get different feedback in a room of seasoned professionals, all in one place at one time. So you can find it very beneficial to do it that way as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think every photographer that I know that's working on a serious project always shows it to other photographers at some point, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where David Murphy, I would slightly diverge and agree with David and Travis. I just did a ASMP portfolio review 2 years ago, and my specific goal, coming from Rhode Island, where I lived in New York, was to start injecting myself into the video, migrating into the video market. That because it wasn't like people, it were like the assignments. And I think I must have cut out there.
You're back now, though. I can't believe you said that. No.
So you said you had portfolio review, but it was more geared towards your video product, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it was basically for networking purposes. I was trying to introduce myself as someone who's doing video into the New York publication market, and it was just a very efficient thing to go to an ASMP portfolio review. Yep. I think it was at SVA, I believe, and there were 10 or 12 reviewers, and speed dating basically.
Yeah.
So.
If you're learning a new craft like video, then by all means, you start from scratch. You start from square one, and you get to learn that new skill. But if you're obviously doing photojournalism, you've been doing it for 10, 20 years, it's not going to really pay off for you to do the portfolio review with somebody who's equal or probably lesser than you looking at your work.
Right.
All right, so we've reached the end of our show pretty much, and of course want to give you all the opportunity to plug whatever you'd like to plug. So with you, Dave, what would you like to plug? Where would you like to send people to check out either yourself or someone else?
Dave Wells.
Dave Buttow. Dave B. Dave Buttow.
Okay.
Sorry, so, Dave B. Like Cardi B. Dave B.
Just without the rap and without the... I definitely not have that. Although I was born in New York. So I've been shooting for the last week or so in Washington, primarily for Time. So they've been putting stuff up on most days that I'm shooting on their Instagram account. So you can find my stuff on Time's Instagram account, like today, and you can find my name on there too. So I just hope people enjoy that's the main thing. It's just for people to get illuminated and on some level. So that's as much as I can ask for. Yeah.
All right, great. Dave Wells.
So So I'm going to flog The Wells Point, which is pretty unoriginal, but it's both a blog, it's a bunch of free educational resources for young photographers. It's also my social media handles on everything, primarily on Instagram because that's my favorite social media of choice. So it's all under The Wells Point, and basically I'm posting every other day, so there's always new stuff.
Oh, fantastic.
Nice.
Fantastic.
All right, Travis. Of course, I know what you're going to post.
Do you now? Why don't we talk about? I'll follow up on what I've started discussing today. If anyone have questions on portfolio reviews or what we do at APA, American Photographic Artists, reach out to me. You can reach me at my personal email at twk@traviswkeys.com. And if you have any questions on Sony, I can answer those too. And social media at twkeyes. Any information, I'll give it to you.
Awesome. All right, and as always, if you're looking for any of the show notes we talked about for tonight's show, if you just want to connect with us, either myself or Travis or anybody who's been on the show, check out AroundTheLens.com. We recently just changed our look, so we've got a nice new look going on, new format with the website, so you can go check that out and tell me what you think of it. If you like it, let me know. If not, maybe we'll try something else. But anyways, I've been your host, David J. Murphy. I want to thank our guests, David Wells and David Buteau, right?
Mm-hmm.
Buteau?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
good,
yes.
good.
Thank you, David.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Davids, and Honorary David, Travis Keys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Honorary.
Thank you,
Thanks.
David. Thank you, Travis. Great hanging out with you guys.
Absolute pleasure.
Really
Look
enjoy
forward to
it.
having you back.
All right, well, this has been...
Nice seeing you again, David. Take care.
Yeah, you too, David. It was really great
right.
to catch up, man.
Gosh, guys, get a room. But anyways...
We actually did have a room.
Oh,
We did have a room, back in the
There's
day.
a whole nother story right there. Another episode.
We shared, three Davids shared a room at one point.
What?
Like I said earlier, there's a movie or a TV show in there somewhere.
Coming up. No.
Too many Davids in one room. That's legally... I question that, but...
Banned in 32 states.
Thank you, my Davids and to Travis, for being on episode 159 of Around the Lens. Again, for all the guests who are on tonight's show, I am David J. Murphy. This has been Around the Lens, episode 159, and we are out. Jump to the outro. Thanks for tuning into Around the Lens. We hope you enjoyed the show, and hope you'll join us next week. In the meantime, go to AroundTheLens.com for show notes from tonight's episode, as well as links to our Patreon, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. We're also always looking for new and exciting guests to feature on each show, so if you know somebody who might be interested, let them know.